All right, congratulations. You made it to question number 13 of the Summa Theologia. We are in prima pars, the first part of the Summa, and I just want to encourage you, as I have done a number of times, keep going, be easy on yourself. Don't worry if something doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make sense to me either. And I often tell people I don't think it all made sense to St. Thomas Aquinas. Okay, he was wrestling with these things just like we are. And so just keep on going. And if you're enjoying it, watch the entire videos, because there are a lot of things in here that you have to learn in order to move on to the next question. All right. So we had the 7 attributes of God. Of course, we had sacred doctrine at the beginning, and then we had how do we come to know God, and then the names of God. Now we enter into the area of philosophy which is called epistemology. What can a certain being know? What is this being capable of knowing? And I purposely said being and not creature because, of course, we and the angels can know things. Animals to some degree can, but not intellectually. But God's knowledge. Okay, this is epistemology at grand scale, because God, as you can expect, pretty much can know everything. But this article this question, I should say, has 16 articles. And so Thomas clearly has great interest in exploring God's knowledge. And a lot of these questions are really, really fascinating. So watch it till the end if you possibly can. And I'll try to make it as concise as possible by starting right now. Article 1 says whether there is knowledge. Okay, if there's no knowledge, then we're wasting our time. Again, this has to do with epistemology. And he starts off by saying, in God there exists the most perfect knowledge. Now, no big surprise there, right? To prove this, we must note that intelligent beings are distinguished from non-intelligent beings in that the latter possesses only their own form. Okay, remember, form and matter are going to keep coming back. Whereas the intelligent being is naturally adapted to have also the form of some other thing, for the idea of the thing known is in the knower. Now, when I say the word cat, you had an image that came into your mind right there. Dog, grasshopper, tree, flower. You know these things. So what he's saying here is these are in you because you've experienced them. We'll get into human epistemology, on the treatise on human nature. They are in you, all right? So, but you don't know everything, and I don't know everything, right? So our knowledge of things is rather limited because we haven't experienced everything so far. But with God, it's a different story, as you might expect. Therefore, the philosopher Aristotle says the soul is, in a sense, all things. That's a really power-packed statement. The soul is, in a sense, all things. What does that mean? That means potentially we can know all things. This is going to have a lot to do with our final end, with beatitude, but I'm getting ahead of myself, okay? Forms, according as they are, the more immaterial approach more nearly to a kind of infinity. All right, so the more immaterial something is, the more it approaches infinity. And so he's saying that since we have body and soul, we have an immaterial soul. Angels are only immaterial. God is thoroughly immaterial. The more immaterial a being is, the more it has a capacity for knowledge. Okay, God is in the highest degree of immateriality, and it follows that he occupies the highest place in knowledge. Okay, no big surprise there. All right, does God understand himself? Yes, God thoroughly understands himself. Since, therefore, God has nothing of potentiality but is pure act, all right? That has to do with his simplicity. His intellect and his object are altogether the same. His intellect and his object are the same. Okay, when I said cat and dog and grasshopper, those are things that's something that we came to know, but it's not in us in the sense that all these things pre-exist in God. Okay, that's a powerful statement. So that he neither is without the intelligible species, as is the case with our intellect when it understands potentially, nor does the intelligible species differ from the substance of the divine intellect. All right, so the intelligible species, these are the things that we can abstract from matter, are in God. Okay, it's almost like it's synonymous with God, right? As it differs in our intellect when it understands actually, but the intelligible species itself is the divine intellect itself, and thus God understands himself through himself. Okay, God understands himself through himself. All right, it's almost like this cycle, like he possesses the forms because they pre-exist in him. Remember, all perfection pre-exists in God, and with us it's separate. We come to know things. With him, it's all part of who he is. Okay, remember, if that's a little bit fuzzy and you don't understand that, well, welcome to the club, okay? Because it's all challenging, but it's also hopefully very interesting. Does God comprehend himself? Remember, one of the things that we learned in question number 12 was that we can know God as intelligent beings, but we cannot comprehend him. God perfectly comprehends himself. A thing is said to be comprehended when the end of the knowledge of it is attained, and this is accomplished when it is known as perfectly as it is knowable. Now it is manifest that God knows himself as perfectly as he is perfectly knowable. All right, so God comprehends himself. Remember, I told you that if we comprehended God, we would be God, right? We're not God, but God is God, so he fully comprehends himself. Okay, whether the act of God's intellect is his substance. Now, when you read that, you're thinking like, what in the world does that mean? Okay, we are a substance. Okay, as body and soul, form and matter, we are a substance, right? Anything that has, identity like that, an angel is a substance. Okay, it's a Aristotelian term, right? But our knowledge, our intellect is something that is part of us. It's not who we are. I am not my intellect. I have an intellect and it's part of my soul, but it's not who I am. But with God, the intellect is who he is, as we will learn. It must be said that the act of God's intellect is his substance. For if his act of understanding were other than his substance, then something else would be the act and perfection of the divine substance, to which the divine substance would be related as potentiality to act. All right. So what we've already talked about in his simplicity is that God is his intellect, his will, his suppositum, his nature, his essence. It's all the same thing, right? And it's only different from our perspective because of our limitations. We have to kind of divide it up. Okay, whether God knows things other than himself. All right, so you might be able to figure this one out. You're saying, okay, if he has all the perfections of everything in him and it's kind of synonymous with who he is, well, then he should know things besides himself, right? God necessarily knows things other than himself, for it is manifest that he perfectly understands himself. Otherwise, his existence would not be perfect, since his existence is his act of understanding. Since, therefore, the divine power extends to other things by the very fact that it is the first effective cause of all things, God must necessarily know other things than himself. Hence, whatever effects pre-exist in God, as is the first cause, must be in his act of understanding, and all things must be in him according to the intelligible mode. All right, again, hard to understand, hard to grasp. Why? Because of the limitations of our minds, not for God. But all these things pre-exist in God. We've already talked about this with the perfection. Remember, do all perfections pre-exist in God? We talked about that previously. So all things that God knows pre-exist in him, and therefore he knows all of them, even to the smallest detail, as we are going to find out. In fact, right here, all right? This has to do with proper knowledge. And this is interesting because what he's saying here with proper knowledge is, does he know things generally? Like, for example, he knows what grasshoppers are, but he doesn't know that particular grasshopper that's out in my yard right now. I mean, does God really know every single one? Well, we know from Scripture that he knows every hair in our head, right? So this is what we're talking about, proper, individual things. Some have erred on this point, saying that God knows things other than himself only in general, that is, only as beings. But this cannot be, for to know a thing in general and not in particular is to have imperfect knowledge. Therefore, neither would his being be perfect, and this is against what has already been said. For it was shown above that whatever perfection exists in any creature wholly preexists and is contained in God in an excelling manner. All right, I've already mentioned that a couple of times in this video. Likewise, every form whereby each thing is constituted in its own species is a perfection. And thus all things preexist in God, not only as regard what is common to all, but as regards what distinguishes one thing from another. So Thomas is saying here, God knows everything. Every blade of grass, every hair in our head, every grasshopper jumping out in the field, even though they all kind of look alike, right? He knows every single one of them. Whether the knowledge of God is discursive. Now, this one I'm going to just kind of explain. I don't need to read it, okay? Discursiveness, as I've already explained before in a previous video, is how we come to know things. We know things one at a time, okay? That's why you're learning these teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas one video at a time, right? I can't just infuse all the knowledge into your head at one time. You're learning it little by little. Just like we go to school, we learn things, we get degrees. With God, that's not the case. He knows everything already. He's not learning little things, bit by bit. His knowledge is not discursive. Okay, is the knowledge of God the cause of things? I love this article. He says, the knowledge of God is the cause of things. For the knowledge of God is to all creatures what the knowledge of the artificer, and I'll explain that, is to things made by his art. Now, the knowledge of the artificer is the cause of the things made by his art from the fact that the artificer works by his intellect. Have you ever written a story? Have you ever built something? Let's say you write a poem. All right. Before you actually write the poem, it's in your head. It's an idea in your mind, right? Let's say you build a table. Okay. Before you build the table and get the wood and the saws and the nails, it's in your mind already. And so it starts in your mind and then it's created. Well, God, being perfectly simple, just the very knowledge of it, united to his will, creates it. All right. It is manifest that God causes things by his intellect, since his being is his active understanding, and hence his knowledge must be the cause of things insofar as his will is joined to it. Article 9. Whether God has knowledge of things that are not. I love this. God knows all things whatsoever in any way they are. Right? Okay, a little bit more explanation. Whatever, therefore, can be made or thought or said by the creature, as also whatever he himself can do, are all known to God, although they are not actual. And insofar as it can be said that he has knowledge even of things that are not. Okay, isn't that fascinating? I mean, think of something that is not, okay? And God knows it. I mean, anyways, I don't know. I'm having too much fun with this article, I guess. Whether God knows evil things. Article 10. Whoever knows a thing perfectly must know all that can be accidental to it. Now, there are some good things to which corruption by evil may be accidental. Hence, God would not know good things perfectly unless he also knew evil things. Now, a thing is knowable in the degree in which it is. Hence, since this is the essence of evil, that it is the privation of good, by the fact that God knows good things, he knows evil things also, as by light is known darkness. Okay, so the evil is an accident of the good. It's a privation of the good. Okay, so if God is going to know things thoroughly, he's going to know even the evil that corrupts the good things. Whether God knows singular things. We already talked about this, so I'm going to go through this quickly. God knows that individual flower. Okay, he knows singular things, for all perfections found in creatures pre-exist in God in a higher way. It's a little bit of a repeat. I don't know why he did that, but anyways, you can reinforce that in your knowledge. Whether God can know infinite things. Now I'm gonna make an admission here. This article confuses me because when we talked about the infinity of God, he asked, St. Thomas did, whether there can be an infinite multitude and whether there can be an infinite magnitude. And he came down basically saying, not really, okay? But here he's saying that God can know infinite things, okay? Since God knows not only things actual, but things possible to himself or to created things, as is shown above, and as these must be infinite, he must be held that he knows infinite things. For God knows even the thoughts and affections of hearts, which will be multiplied to infinity as rational creatures go on forever. All right, so I got to kind of throw up my hands on this one. It's a little bit confusing to me, but just suffice it to say that God can know infinite things. Maybe it's the fact that he can know them even though we can't grasp it. That's probably the best I can do on this thing. Okay, whether the knowledge of God is of future contingent things, all right? Contingency means when we have a choice to make and we could go one way or the other and we make a decision, well, does he know all the possibilities, all the things that might have happened had we chosen this or had we chosen that? God knows all things, not only things actual, but all things possible to him and the creature. And since some of these are future contingent to us, it follows that God knows future contingent things. Does God know enunciable things? I had to look this up. Like, what exactly does he mean by enunciable things? And the best I can do is, does he know thoughts? Does he know, okay, if I'm thinking of a giraffe right now, does God know my thoughts? Well, of course, he does. Since it is in the power of our intellect to form enunciations, and since God knows whatever is in his own power or in that of creatures, it follows of necessity that God knows all enunciations that can be formed. Just as he knows material things immaterially and composite things simply, so likewise he knows enunciable things not after the manner of enunciable things. Okay. All right. So even the thoughts in our mind. Whether the knowledge of God is variable, he says it's not variable. Okay. It's altogether immutable, as shown above, so his knowledge likewise must be altogether invariable and not variable, okay, not changing. And finally, okay, I enjoy this, but this is a lot of articles. And, okay, whether God has speculative knowledge of things. So speculative versus practical. Speculative has to do with the contemplation of truth. Practical has to do with operations. And so what he says here in the very end of this question, in accordance with this, therefore, it must be said that God has of himself a speculative knowledge only, for he himself is not operable. But of all other things, he has both speculative and practical knowledge. He has speculative knowledge as regards the mode, for whatever we know speculatively in things by defining and dividing, God knows all this much more perfectly. All right, so there's contemplation of truth, and then there's the knowledge of operations and things that work within time. Within God himself, he knows speculatively because he doesn't operate, outside of time, right? But then when it comes to the creature, he knows both speculatively and also practically as well. Okay, you made it. All right. The next question we're going to do tomorrow only has 3 articles. Okay, it's going to get a lot easier. If you survive these last 3 questions and you watch these videos to the end, give yourselves a big kudos. Let me know in the comments, like, hey, I made it. I'm 13 questions in. I'm with you. If that's the case, kudos to you. Hope you're enjoying this. Again, like I said at the beginning, this is a workout. This is an intellectual workout. But it's so worth it because we're learning about God, and eventually we're going to get into the Trinity and then the angels and creation and human nature, and I'm enjoying it very much. So thank you for journeying with me. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you're still with it and enjoying it, and God bless you for journeying through the Summa Theologia, and we'll see you for question number 14 tomorrow, which is on ideas. 3 articles, short question on ideas. St. Thomas Aquinas, pray for us.